services by appointment only. Members of the public are invited to participate meeting electronically by accessing the meeting live stream video at kitchener.ca/watch now. While in-person delegations are not feasible at this time, members of the public are invited to participate electronically in future meetings by contacting delegation at kitchener.ca to register as a delegation or submit written comments. So the first item is a consent item. It's moved by Councillor Davey. I'm not seeing any questions. I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that item carries. So we move on to the public hearing matter under the Planning Act. This is a formal public meeting to consider applications under the Planning Act. If a person or public body that would otherwise have an ability to appeal a decision of the City of Kitchener to the local planning appeal tribunal, but the person or public body does not make oral submissions at the public meeting or make written submissions to the City of Kitchener before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision. I'm guessing the local planning appeals tribunal, I'm not sure if it's the same title or I think it's updated now. Ontario Land Tribunal. Anywho, so item number 4.A. Tim will provide a 5-minute PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair.
We can't hear you. Your mic's muted, I think.
Can you hear me now?
Through the chair, yes, Tim, I could hear you.
Okay, just double checking. Everybody good to go? All right, pull up the presentation, please, again. Great, thank you very much. Good evening, Chair, Mayor, and members of Council. My name is Tim Seiler, and I'm a planner here at the City of Kitchener. I'm here tonight to make a recommendation for approval of a zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment to facilitate the conversion of existing mixed-use buildings from 3 residential units and 2 office units to 5 residential units total. Next slide, please. Here I will point out that the subject properties are located on the south side of Roy Street between Yonge Street and Queen Street. To the north of the property are low-rise residential dwellings. To the east and west are a mix of residential and office units. And to the south along Weber Street is a mix of office, commercial, residential, and institutional uses. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide. Thank you. Now I will go over a bit of a background on the site. The subject properties are located within the Civic Center Neighborhood Secondary Plan and Civic Center Heritage Conservation District. They are also located within a major transit station area and are designated office residential conversion in the official plan. The current buildings each contain 3 residential units and 2 office units. The office units have been vacant since approximately 2019. Next slide, please. I will now speak briefly about the current opportunity before us tonight. The applicant is proposing to convert the existing office units into residential units in order to provide more dwelling units within the established area. This will permit gentle intensification within the neighborhood by permitting 4 additional residential units total. Staff support the application as there are no exterior changes to either of the buildings and it will maintain the current built form. The special policy area and zoning provisions have been created specifically to only allow the additional units to be within the existing structures. No exterior changes or building additions are permitted through this official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. Next slide, please. The image shown on the slide are concept site plans for both properties. Site plan applications will be required to be submitted in order to ensure all zoning regulations are met. This includes 5 parking spaces, 1 per each unit. An increased outdoor amenity space is to be provided, as well as bicycle parking on site. Staff will also ensure that the appropriate measures are in place for garbage storage and pickup. Next slide, please. Now I will summarize the staff is recommending approval for the applications that would permit the 5 dwelling units on each property within the existing buildings. The proposed application represents good planning principles and are consistent with and conform to the provincial, regional, and city planning policies. This slide is the proposed zoning map for the area. This will conclude my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Seiler. I have a question from Councillor Michaud.
Thank you. Through Councillor Singh, thank you. Just one question. You said there's 3 rental units and 2 office spaces in there currently, correct?
Correct.
Are there people living in the 3 rental units right now?
Yes.
So what happens to them?
The best of my recollection through the chair, those units would stay, and the 2 office units would just be converted to residential units. So there would be no other changes to the other 3 units.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Michaud. Councillor Marsh?
Yeah, do we have a delegate for this topic as well?
I didn't have it listed on my notes. Madam Clerk?
Through the chair, yes, my apologies. There is a representative for the applicant from MHBC Planning.
Okay. Councillor Marsh, you're more in the know than I.
I'm happy. No, I'm happy to wait and to ask my questions till after the delegate.
Is the delegation prepared?
We're just trying to move her over. Just one second.
Councillor Chapman, did you have a quick question of staff in the meantime?
I'll wait as well. Thank you.
I'll note both you and Councillor Marsh. Councillor Marsh being first and you second when we come back.
Through Mr. Mayor, Nicolette's been given permission to use the microphone. I just can't get her to move over as a panelist.
Okay. Nicolette?
You should be able to. Committee.
Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. My name is Nicolette Van Ooyen. I'm with MHBC Planning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Great. So I'm here tonight on behalf of our clients, Windermere Apartments Incorporated, and would like to thank Tim for his comprehensive presentation. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. I believe Councillor Marsh has a question for you.
Thank you so much for coming in. I see no problem with this request, but I do have some questions. It's my understanding that the placement of the garbage bin for Windermere Apartments' other building, which is 48 Weber, is placed directly behind 48 Weber and be at the backyard of 61 Roy. Is that correct?
That's my understanding as well. Now, we will be required for the 61 and 65 Roy Street properties to go through site plan approval process. So we're working at cleaning up the rear yards and creating amenity space and a proper garbage location facility for those two properties and separating from the Weber Street property.
Oh, okay, great. And so I've heard from neighbors of the properties that that the garbage bin is not locked and that it causes a lot of issues when individuals who go dumpster diving or even vermin that go in the garbage will remove items from the garbage and it gets all over. So can you please confirm that your client is ready to go ahead and make sure that the garbage is secure and that those issues will not continue?
Yes, absolutely. And it is our client's intention to address that situation.
Great.
And as mentioned, we will be going through the site plan approval process. So that will be taken care of through that process. Thanks.
And then for the parking that was implemented there for the previous iteration of the with the office spaces, there was so much asphalt placed on the backyard. I realize that some of it will be removed through site plan, so that's good. I just want to also confirm that drainage issues that are affecting neighbors will no longer be an issue.
Yeah, correct. All those issues will be addressed through site plan.
Okay, and then I just want to alert you to one additional problem with back to the garbage bins. It's my understanding that the garbage truck that is contracted to come and remove the garbage is not, it doesn't fit in the driveway the way it is. And so the neighbor has to move their car every time that the driver needs to get back there. So I would just ask that that be addressed as well. Can you confirm that that will be addressed through site plan also, please? Yes, we will definitely make note of all of those things, and I'm sure Tim is doing the same. And our client is obviously happy to work with City Hall and wanting to address your concerns. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that Windermere wants to be a good neighbor, and so let's work on that. So those are all my questions. Thanks so much. You're welcome.
Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you for this. It's really nice to see the retrofitting of an existing building. I think that's wonderful. Do you plan to have any of these units affordable?
I can't speak definitively for the client on that. I'm not 100% sure if that's the intention, but there are 5 units. The units are definitely, on the small side, ranging between 600 and 800 square feet. So they will be they may not fall within the region's standards of affordability, but they will definitely be on the lower market value.
Okay. And what about, my other question has to do with the parking. Will there be any handicap designated parking spots?
There will be one accessible barrier-free space allotted, a total of 5 parking spaces, and one of those will be allocated as barrier-free. There will also be bicycle racks installed as part of the site plan.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
That's all the questions from the committee. Thank you very much for presenting. All right, Councillor Marsh, did you still have a question of staff?
Sure. So Mr. Saylor, I've been in contact with the neighbors and I think you have too. And I just want to confirm that all the issues raised by the resident, including the ones I mentioned tonight, will be able to be addressed adequately.
Through the chair, yes, I did have discussions with the neighbor as well, and did hear their feedback, and we're going to take all of their comments into advisement and address them at the site plan stage.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. Chair Singh, I'm happy to move this at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, I'm just curious why, and maybe, I don't know if Tim, you're the one to respond to this question, but I'm just wondering why, the garbage has been a problem and the grading has been a problem on a property that's only going to be retrofitted. It's not going to be rebuilt or demolished and rebuilt. Like, is there a reason why this hasn't been addressed sooner?
Through the chair, I don't know specifically about the grading. It's probably just due to over time, it's kind of an aged backyard. And as for the garbage, I'm not sure how long that situation has been going on with the 48 Weber Street at the back there either.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Schneider,
Not a question, just comment.
go right ahead.
No, I just want to say this is a great, gentle intensification in a nice neighborhood that's close to all the things we want people to be able to be close to and walkable to. So good work by staff, good work by Councillor Marsh and by the applicant as well.
Excellent. I don't see anyone else for comments, so I'll just quickly make myself, same as Councillor Schneider. This is definitely an example of a gentle intensification. It needs to add an increased inventory of rental units in our community. That's something that we're desperately hungry for. We have a lot of development happening, but it tends to be more towards condo development. Not to say it's bad, it's additional housing stock. But at the end of the day, when we want to affect affordability, additional rental housing is always an improvement. So that's great to see that we're going to have a few extra units. With that, it's moved by Councillor Marsh, I believe. Don't need a seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? And that item carries. Thank you very much. And on to item number 5A, which is the Kitchener Growth Management Strategy 2021 Annual Monitoring Report. And Mr. Donaghy, you are going to speak to it whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Singh and members of the committee. Today, I'm presenting to you about the 12th annual iteration of the annual monitoring report for the Kitchener Growth Management Strategy. This report is delivered every year, and it looks at some of the key quantitative metrics around intensification, density targets, and housing supply. This year, the report was prepared by me as well as by Tim that you just heard from earlier from development planning, and we're going to tag team this presentation. So first I'll hand it over to Tim.
Thank you, Tim. We'll go to the first slide. So the first slide here shows how many building permits have been issued over the last 20 years. As you can see, there are a high level of multiple residential buildings that are being constructed, and that is expected when it comes to intensification. There are a few years that have had higher building permit rates due to a few key projects. However, you notice that the last 2 years, 2019 and 2020, are noticeably higher. These last couple of years could be outliers because of the expiration of the DC exemptions, as there was an increased push by the development industry to get building permits issued. Also note that in the last couple of years, the amount of building permits to convert single detached dwellings to duplexes have increased. The rate of development for all unit types have exceeded the 5 and 10-year averages. It's not only a case of adding more multiples. The city is adding important stock across a range of housing types to meet the needs of our growing city. Next slide, please. The regional official plan requires the achievement of the region-wide target of a minimum of 45% of all new residential development annually to be located within the built-up area. This map 1 illustrates the location of Kitchener's built-up area, designated greenfield area, and built boundary. It also shows the location of new units created within these areas between June 16, 2020 and June 15, 2021. The minimum intensification target is subject to change through the ongoing regional official plan review. As you can see, the city has exceeded the 45% target this year, with mostly multiple dwellings being constructed in the built-up area. Approximately half of all construction within the designated greenfield area is single detached dwellings. The other half are a combination of multiples, townhouses, and duplexes. Next slide, please. As you can see from this chart, this shows the average intensification levels. The averages for the last few years have exceeded the minimum 45% target. We do expect to see peaks and valleys in the average, and we expect somewhat lower intensification rates in the next few years as more new greenfield subdivisions are approved and come online. As mentioned previously, with the downtown DC exemption expiring, we saw an increase in the developments there in the last couple of years, driving up the intensification rate in the short term. A couple of large high-rise residential development projects can create significant swings in the annual intensification rate. Long-term averages are likely a better indication of future trends. The average intensification rate for the years in the 2006 and 2011 period was less than the 45% minimum. The 2011 to 2016 and 2016 to 2020 average exceeded the minimum target. Next slide, please. And I'm going to hand it back over to my colleague, Tim Donaghy, who will continue the presentation.
Thank you. So this chart here shows the existing measures of density through the various intensification areas through the city. And I don't expect you to, or I don't want to look through all those together on this slide. A key point that I wanted to highlight through this conversation was about the Urban Growth Center. So as you may know, the province prescribes a minimum density target for the Urban Growth Center of downtown Kitchener of 200 residents and jobs per hectare by 2031. As you can see here, Kitchener's actually exceeded that target as of this year. To our knowledge, Kitchener is the first urban growth center outside of Toronto to exceed its minimum provincial intensification target. I also note that the Kitchener official plan has a higher intensity or density target for downtown of 225 residents and jobs per hectare by 2031. So we're well on the way to achieving those targets. The other intensification areas here don't have specific targets, but they're tracked here as part of the growth management framework. Next slide. The intensification areas that I showed you in the previous slide are based on the geographies that were identified in the previous official plan. It didn't include an evaluation of major transit station areas. But as we're moving into a new regime and policy framework through the regional official plan update and the planning around rapid transit stations, neighborhood planning review, understanding the density around major transit station areas is becoming increasingly important. That's not included in the framework that's existing, but in this slide, we're sharing a bit of initial data that was provided by the region on how we're doing on tracking against those targets. We know that there'll be a provincial minimum target of 160 residents and jobs per hectare for all the major transit station areas. We suspect that there'll be a lower target. The regions request a lower target for block line. So in the second to last column, you can see most of the major transit station areas have a long way to go to achieve their targets. The Victoria Park and Kitchener City Hall station area has already exceeded its 160 residents and jobs per hectare target. And the Frederick and Queen station area is well on its way. Next slide. One of the key punchlines or final findings of this report is looking at of the housing supply that we have in the pipeline, either in site plans, intensification areas, plans of subdivision, or future plans that are not part of plans of subdivision yet, but they expect them to come in. Do we have sufficient land identified and designated in our planning documents to accommodate our population and employment forecast to 2031? This is a summary of several of the charts in the management framework. In short, we have a sufficient supply to meet and exceed both housing or both population and employment forecast to 2031 across a broad range of housing types and employment types. Next slide, please. So I've shared a few of the key numbers from this presentation, but it's important to discuss what are these numbers all about? So the rates of intensification, progress on density targets, understanding supply are all good indicators of the planning objectives that we're trying to achieve. We're starting to see results on the ground of our long-range planning work. We're seeing density and intensification. We're seeing a full range of housing types and a mix of supply. But we also know that the numbers are not the whole picture. Crucial in our planning work are planning for complete and vibrant communities with a range and mix of housing types, density and a mix of uses that drives transit supportive and walkable communities. As we progress on these intensification and density targets, we can advance climate and affordability objectives. So the numbers are not the whole story. Just because a number is achieved in the short term doesn't mean we should pack up and go home. There's still more planning work to be done. It's also important to note that the targets, both in the regional official plan and the city's official plan, they're minimums, they're not maximums. They're also subject to increase and change. We expect to see some increases in these targets and policies as we work through the regional official plan review that's currently underway. Now, I alluded earlier that the monitoring framework is based on the old official plan, not the one that's currently in force. And we know that we need to update the monitoring framework. As we go through and do that in the coming years, in response to the regional official plan review, we'll bring in some additional data around the major transit station areas, other gross areas, how we're achieving on different housing types, adjust to additional provincial policy, and really roll in all the new requirements of the official plan, Places to Grow, the regional official plan, and the new 2051 population and employment targets that we expect to see in the coming years. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you for your interest.
Yes, thank you, Tim. We appreciate that. Councillor Davey, you have a question? Oh, actually, you know what? Before, my apologies. There is a delegation. And prior to that, I just want to bring the attention to the committee that we did receive a written submission on the matter from Hal Yeager. So when you have the opportunity, please refer to that. And our first delegate, or only delegation, unless there's none, sorry, some noted that are not on my committee notes. Mr. Burrows, Steve Burrows. Steve, when you're ready, you have 5 minutes.
All right, we there?
Yes, we can hear you.
5
minutes.
Thanks for giving me a chance to speak tonight. I just have 4 comments, I think. It was an extremely difficult document to get through, just kind of trying to figure out where the numbers all go and how it's all come together. I was just going to look at figure 8 first. And before I go into that, though, I just wanted to understand the 50% rule that is being applied to development, that basically you're assuming that only about 50% of capacity gets developed. I was just trying to understand, how is that currently comparing to the UGC? Are developers only developing 50% of the available capacity, or is it more than that, or is it more than 100%, for instance, in the UGC? I'm just wondering how that works out and how that plays into the numbers that are being shown. And then the other thing I was just looking at is the number of residents that are planned to come into the UGC, 3,400 residents. And if we were to go back to the meeting we just had about parkland, and we were to say that as a minimum, each of those 3,400 get the 10 square meters, that comes to about 3.4 hectares of parkland for the UGC. So about 4% of all of the UGC would have to be parkland. And I'm just wondering, how is that being taken into consideration through these planning policies and urban growth management? The second thing I was just going to ask is about figure 14. Figure 14 is the one that you're just speaking to regarding the major transit station areas. And looking at Victoria Park again, because that's just where it most impacts me. is at 178 versus the 168 resident jobs per hectare. And the interesting point there is that that area includes Victoria Park. So that would be a significant area that can't be developed, which would suggest that the area that is being developed is quite dense, relatively speaking. And so I'm just wondering, how do those numbers get taken into account when you're looking at areas that are included in the major transit station areas and the densities, and how does that get accounted for? And then figure 12, again, just looking at looking at the future development. And you were saying earlier that the future development is meant to be 45% or something to that effect within the built up area. And figure 12 suggests that there'd be 25,000 residents in the built up area and 45,000 residents in the designated greenfield area. So that's a double the number of residents going into the greenfield area relative to the built up area. So that's going to bring down those averages, I think, significantly, for one. And that also refers back to the to figure 3. And figure 3 says between 2019 2020, there were double the number of single detached homes being done, and the number of multi-unit res went down. And I'm just wondering if staff thinks that that's a trend that's going to continue, that more people are going to be looking for single family, and that's what's gearing towards a doubling of the greenfield area being developed. And finally, the last one I was just going to look at is the planning principles. And the sentence says, Kitchener's efforts to continue to revitalize the urban growth center, clean up brownfield sites, and achieve mixed use developments that are pedestrian oriented and are significant. And with that respect, I'm just trying to understand, well, one, how does that play into the city's plans for what they're doing? Things like, say, turning Joseph into a one-way, which has 8 streets connecting that tee into it, and yet there's only 3 pedestrian crossings amongst 8 streets. So that doesn't seem very pedestrian friendly to me. And I'm also trying to understand, how does that relay back into planning policy when you're trying to decide what areas are industrial or institutional or greenfield relative to what is being built up? So those are my 4 questions.
Thank you, Steve. And again, you had 5 minutes, which you've made. What I do recommend is staff have taken note of your questions, and I encourage staff to be able to reach out to Mr. Burrows in giving him some greater understanding of the concerns or questions that he's laid out. And that way, further to that, once he has a better understanding of that, if he wants to present himself again as a delegation to further his points, we again encourage you to do so, Mr. Burrows. Again, your input is always helpful. And at the same time, committee might take opportunity to ask some of the questions that you laid out. I've taken note of you. I'm sure others have too. And was there anything else you wanted to add? I can give you a minute or so.
Nope, that's everything. Thank you.
Okay, as always, thank you very much. All right, so we'll go to the questions of staff. Councillor Davey, you had your hand up.
Yeah, it's just one question in terms of I guess what we're calling the target. It was pointed out that it's a minimum target, and I'm wondering, like, is minimum, I to take that to be the ideal target going forward? And the reason I ask is because there seems to be some consensus growing now that we're behind in terms of, I mean, as a country, even behind in the terms of number housing units. The government's looking at increasing all the time. So are we expected to see that these targets rise significantly? At what level of government is that going to happen?
Through you, Chair Singh, thank you for the question. So the new growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, that's called A Place to Grow, has a few key targets that we are going to see increase. The most important one is the old growth plan says minimum intensification rate, so the percentage of units that are occurring within the built-up boundary. In the old growth plan, it was a minimum 40. Our ROP says 45. In the new growth plan and the work that's being done to implement the new ROP, that's a minimum of 50% rate of intensification. As you may remember from August, the region is testing 50, 55, and 60% intensification scenarios. We're seeing new targets for major transit station areas at 160 residents and jobs per hectare. That's new. We haven't seen that before. But basically, it's a provincial policy-led system where those hard targets come from the province, they get fed down through the regional official plan, then into the city's official plan. It's also important to note that in some cases, the city can go higher than those regional or provincial targets. The regional and provincial target for the downtown Kitchener UGC is 200 residents and jobs per hectare. Our official plan has a 225 residents and jobs per hectare. But to your question about, is the minimum the ideal? No, it's the minimum. A whole bunch of planning principles are important beyond achieving the numbers.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask your, and maybe you can't comment on this, but I thought I'd ask anyway, your professional opinion. So because of the again, the widely regarded supply deficit, is that, in your opinion, a result of, and maybe there's no way they could have known, but is that a result of the targets being too low in the past? And is that can be corrected?
Yeah, interesting question, Chair Davey. So overall, through this report, we're showing that there is a variety of and ample opportunity for growth of all different kinds of housing supply, both within the built-up area and the designated greenfield area, and all the different types of housing supply, from singles, semis, towns, multiples, duplexes, lots of variety of supply and opportunity for the market to meet that need. So as far as this report shows, we're doing well to set the stage for the market to come online and address some of those housing challenges. There's more work to be done by a lot of actors to try and address the housing price issues that we're having. I think supply is part of the equation, not the only part.
Okay, thank you for the report. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you. I find this all very encouraging, actually, and it's nice to see these figures before us today, because I know there's been a lot of uncertainty around the density ratios. So this report was based on data in 2020, is that correct?
Through you, Chair Singh, the vast majority of data in this report works on a June 20 to a June 2021 cycle. That June 16th date is the anniversary that the growth plan came into effect. So with the exception of the figures 1, 2, and 3, they're all that June to June reporting period.
Okay, I don't know what you mean by 1, 2, and 3, but okay. Where it says residential development ratios in 2020, does that take us right up to June 2021 on page 49? Well, page 2, I guess, of the report. It depends what numbers you're looking at.
49. I'm having trouble putting my finger on it. Is it about the intensification rate, the 75 and the 67?
No, I'm right on page 2, maybe is an easier way for you to find it.
Sure.
It says residential development rates underneath highlights of the 2021 monitoring report include, and then the first one is residential development rates in 2020. Is that 2020 the calendar year as we know it, or does that take us right through to June of 2021?
So we've actually reported both. Figure 3, which is on page 56, shows the total units in 2020 calendar as 3803. And then if you go to figure 4, which is on page 58, it shows the total units for June to June being 3794. So both the numbers are reported there. They're similar.
I'm looking more at the report and not the report. I guess there are two different reports we're looking at here. Okay, that's fine. So I guess we don't know what's included and what's not as far as the developments have to be finished to be counted in these numbers? Do they have to have gone through the site plan review process? What is the cutoff?
Yeah, through you, Chair Singh, the cutoff to show up as a new unit is a building permit issue. So that's in the case of a high-rise building, it's got to be both the foundation and the superstructure, not necessarily that they've been occupied yet.
Not that necessarily what, I'm sorry?
Not necessarily occupied yet.
Okay. Yeah, the other question I had has to do with the map. Can you send us a link of the map? It's very hard to read. But maybe if I could go into the map online, I might be able to expand it, if you don't mind. I mean, when you have time. My next question has to do with page 60, and this is figure 7. And I'm looking specifically at the UGC numbers. And tell me if I've got this right. So if we take a target of 225 units per 107 hectare land area, and we multiply them, we come up with 24,075 residential units. And subtract it from then, well, residential units and jobs. And then if we take the 212 and multiply it by the same 107 hectares, we get 22,754 residents and jobs in that area. And the difference we come up with is 1,321. So am I right in saying that what we're looking at here is that by 2031 in the UGC area, our target is 1,321 more units and jobs in the UGC area than we currently have?
Through you, Chair Singh, I had trouble following along with the math there a little bit. So to take us from 212 to 225 would be an additional 13 residents and jobs per hectare. So if you just don't mind me up, I'll just open my calculator here.
And I'm just looking at the UGC as I
yes. So I've got 1,391. Did you come up with
okay, I got 1,321. I don't know, but whatever.
Okay.
I mean, that's basically 2 buildings. So between now, we talk about density ratios between now and 2031. And I appreciate the fact that, yes, these things might change as the official plans get modified, but that's pretty telling. And I'm pointing this out because, we're constantly being reminded of how we need to build and more density. And really, just to meet our targets right now, we would probably need 2, maybe 3 new buildings in the UGC area. So I point this out because I think this is really important to show how far along we've come, and maybe we can slow down a bit and not be on this massive treadmill with development, especially in the UGC area. So I just wanted to point that out. I also wanted to return to the planning. Do I still have time, or do you want me to keep back in?
No, I think it'd be best if you keep back in.
Okay.
It's 6 minutes in, so Councillor Marsh is behind you. So once he's done, you're welcome to ask your questions. Councillor Marsh, go ahead.
I just want to understand a little bit better about the residents and jobs per hectare goal. It's my understanding that is coming down from the province and the region. That's not really even our target, other than the change in the urban growth center. Is that correct?
Yeah, through you, Chair Singh, the genesis of an urban growth center density target is from the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. That was 200 residents and jobs by 2031. And the Kitchener decided to go higher to 225, 2031. So we're coming up upon 2031 shortly. We expect that in all likelihood, we'll achieve and exceed that 225. It's important to note that we're expecting to see growth in downtown past 2031. And also achievement of the numbers doesn't mean we've achieved all our downtown objectives in terms of livability, complete communities, economic development, etc. Those are all crucial things above and beyond the numbers.
Okay, great. And now I understand that the delegates' questions, we had a lot of detailed questions that I'm sure staff will be able to follow up with him offline. But the one question, two questions I wanted to just follow up on. One is about parkland. We have already identified a gap in the number of park spaces and open spaces. Is that in any way going to be affected by, or sorry, is that going to affect any of our targets?
Oh, yeah, through you, Chair Singh. I think as we go through park planning and downtown planning, there is a relationship. So we need to make sure that the growth that we're planning for is supported by all the kinds of supporting community services that folks expect. So, parks among them. So the short answer is yes. Downtown planning and park planning should walk and talk together.
Great. Yeah. And so that will be revisited, I think, with our open spaces and places strategy that's forthcoming. And then I wanted to know, in terms of capacity, infrastructure capacity within the Urban Growth Center, it sounds, I just want to put members of the public's minds at ease. Can you speak to the capacity that we have in terms of capacity for growth?
Yeah, through you, Chair Singh, the capacity that we have identified in downtown is very robust. There's opportunities for lots of growth, both on the water and the sanitary side. We've seen a lot of infrastructure capacity grow through the establishment of ION LRT there. So in their foresight, previous civil servants and councils have worked to upsize infrastructure downtown. So we're reaping those benefits now. Okay,
good to know. And I just want to thank you for this detailed report. It's a lot of good information in there.
Councillor Snyder.
Thank you, Chair Singh. Tim, you mentioned your comment about it's not just meeting the numbers, it's creating great things. Are you noticing, or development industry noticing, demands for one type of dwelling over another?
Through you, Chair Singh, I think maybe the best indication of the demand is possibly the development rates that we've seen historically. So if you go back to the first slide that Tim presented, it showed a pretty significant uptick in the amount of multiple dwellings that we've seen year over year based on past trends. Singles have been relatively stable, townhouses relatively stable, a lot more duplex relative to where they were historically, and a lot more multiples in absolute terms.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you, Councillor Schneider. Councillor Chapman, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. I also had a similar question to that of Councillor Marsh about parkland. Over and over again, we get these new developments with no parkland. So I know it's going to come up in places and spaces, but what's the planning department doing to push for more parkland in the downtown core as new developments come to you?
Through you, Chair Singh, it may be a bit premature for me to jump the gun on that, but we do have the ability to take both land or cash generally throughout the city. Historically, downtown development has been exempt from cash in lieu of parkland development or land. We expect that to change through the update to places and spaces, but it's probably premature for me to strategize all the different ways that we'll be trying to get more parkland in downtown. I just don't have the answers for you right now.
Okay.
Stay tuned though, that will come through places and spaces.
Okay. I just wanted to go to one of the questions asked by the delegation about the Victoria Park and Kitchener City Hall area. And he pointed out that Victoria Park is included in these figures, and yet he was saying that that can't be developed. So does that inflate the numbers that are shown here? I think I got that right. I didn't actually write down his question, but I think that's what he was saying.
Yeah, through you, Chair Singh, to Councillor Chapman. The information that's presented here is based on the draft boundaries of the major transit station areas. Those haven't been finalized yet, but the ones that are in the region, the region's latest technical briefing on intensification includes part of Victoria Park, really just the lands sort of north of Jubilee Drive are included in the MTSA. The portion of Victoria Park that's south of Jubilee Drive are not in the MTSA. So it's mostly not in the MTSA.
Okay, and I guess my final question, and let me just say, I think this is wonderful to have this available to us. I really appreciate it. But there's no mention of affordable housing anywhere. And is that under the planning principles, you know, is that something that should be included in that section? Like affordability?
Yeah, thank you for the comment, Councillor Chapman. We know we need to do a significant rework of this growth management monitoring framework. It's 12 years old, it's showing its age. I think one of the things that we'll consider as we revamp this is how to layer in some affordability reporting going forward. So your comments are well taken here.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks for the report.
Thank you, Mr. Donaghy. So that seems to be all the questions of the committee. I have a couple, and I think I'll piggyback on the last question about the affordable units. And for you addressed regarding supply, when Councillor Davey had asked and saying that supply doesn't necessarily, you know, tend to be the only factor regarding affordability, but it does play some aspects of it. So the type of supply that's coming. So not all development is equal. You know, when we have high rises going up that are predominantly for condo development, and they are at market, above market, and quite competitive entry point for most people to come into, especially millennials or, you know, certain demographics of our society that struggle with pay scale. Rental units help towards that, especially rental units in low rise significantly help towards that. And now I know that duplexing is allowed citywide, but when we look at reporting such as yours, this is an excellent opportunity for us to see that soft, sensitive intensification spread throughout our city, triplexes, fourplexes, fiveplexes, 10plexes. Beyond that, we're talking about bigger development. But developments such as these tend to cater to a lower price point of entry. Can you specify how many triplexes or fourplexes or, you know, the low rises that have come online over the periods that you addressed when you were saying, you know, how we were meeting our density targets?
Yeah, I can follow up with those numbers. They do exist in the background.
Okay, that's really helpful. And that helps us to address how are we supporting our density targets. It helps us to show where our missing gaps are in our planning policy. Because when we're addressing affordability, ensuring that we have enough of these smaller units or units that, you know, are lower price point coming and building and are attractive to build by the development community, that speaks to a wider range of the affordability strategy and across the board of the spectrum. So with that, thank you very much for the report. It is very comprehensive. There's a lot of detail in there. It's tough to decipher all of it through this meeting alone. Hopefully it's, you know, through reading it all through and of course asking staff detailed questions as we have. And I encourage committee to further inquire more if you have any other questions, as hopefully staff will help to answer some of the questions asked during this committee. With that, just for reference, I believe there's no vote on it. Or
through you, Chair Singh, it is a requirement of our delegation of authority report to the region that we submit those application data. So I think staff does, or historically has asked for direction of council on that. Is it strictly required? I don't know, but that's the recommendation before you.
Okay, so when we look at it as a direction, can we make some notes as, can we refer the notes that, or questions or comments made through the committee as part of the report as we're referring it to the region? So the comments be referred as well? Because there needs to be a point to this meeting then, right? Other than just receiving the information.
Through you, Chair Singh. So there is a requirement for us to submit this to the region as our annual monitoring report, and that's what's reflected in the recommendation. Staff have taken notes and have indicated in the staff report that we are looking to revamp. So I don't think that direction needs to be provided to the region to make it, to make changes in our next year report. Staff are keeping track of those, and we'll look at our future annual monitoring reports and how that they can be accommodated in that revamp.
So, Mr. Reedman, do you think the region would not find it helpful of receiving the comments to the committee? And because they've been varied and helpful to get a fuller picture of how this information is being received by Kitchener Council, and it helps to direct them on their future planning.
Through the chair, I believe that the region has specific requirements that they need to have, as part of that monitoring report, which primarily include around intensification targets. So what's in the built up area versus greenfield. And so there are specific thresholds in that they're looking for. A number of the comments today are things that council, I think, is looking for in particular. And so, I suppose it could be passed on to the region, but I don't know if that would meet their reporting requirements.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Hopefully our colleagues are watching what we say and when we meet. So I'll leave it at that. With that, I'll take a mover. Moved by Councillor Chapman. All those in favor? And opposed? And that item carries. And I thank staff for compiling the report and with your presentation and answering the questions. It's greatly helpful. We look forward to getting some additional information as well. And that would be it. Thank you very much, everyone. Meeting adjourned. Take care.